Here's what's coming up on the world today. UK doctors strike outside London hospital calling for pay restoration. Plus, authorities in Malawi close schools in 10 southern districts over Cyclone Freddy. Now to other stories. China is on charted waters economically, but it is determined to trudge on in realizing its 5% GDP growth for the year 2023. While today, the new premier, Li Qiang, assured industries of a conducive and encouraging environment that will promote growth locally and internationally. President Xi Jinping also charged the government to go above and beyond to bringing its vision to pass over the next 5 years. Well, our foreign affairs correspondent, Amarachi Ubani, reports from Beijing.
Premier Li Qiang and his team walk up to the podium for the start of the World Press Conference, signaling the end of the 2 sessions of the Chinese People's Political Consultative Conference in the Great Hall of the People in Beijing. Early in the day, at the closing ceremony, re-elected President Xi Jinping told delegates and representatives that China will spare no effort to live up to its history and to its people. He charged them to uphold high-quality development, apply a new and complete development philosophy, speed up and foster new development, and further implement the strategy of developing the country through science and education, and the strategy to strengthen the country through talent and to promote innovation-driven development. Some of the new premier expanded at the press conference through an interpreter.
This year marks the 45th anniversary of the launch of reform and opening up in China. Reform and opening up have enabled China to develop itself and also make an impact on the whole world. This year, we will further expand opening up in alignment with high-standard international trade rules. China will only open itself wider to the world. We will provide better environment and services for all. An open China, a China that is in a constant process of development, welcomes investments from all over the world.
China's post-COVID-19 economic development has been a hot topic in the country, and Premier Chiang sought to allay fears of instability and promised jobs for the country's over 11 million university graduates churned out last year.
We will continue to pursue an employment-first strategy. We will increase government support in terms of employment services and technical training. We will take multiple steps to stabilize and expand employment. We will also support and regulate the development of new forms of employment. I've noticed that people on the internet care a lot about the employment of college graduates. Indeed, this year we expect to see 11.58 million college graduates entering the workforce, which will be a record high. This large number certainly adds pressure to employment, but if we look at it from a development perspective, it could be a good thing, because with so many young people entering the workforce, they can inject energy and vitality into our society.
For almost 2 weeks, representatives have been speaking with a section of international press on developmental strides in medicine, agriculture, and automobile manufacturing. The government has announced a target of 5% growth in gross domestic product in 2023. Getting there is where the real work lies. Here in Beijing, China.
British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak says that an extra £5 billion will be spent to replenish ammunition stocks and fund the next phase of the submarine pact with the United States and Australia in an update to Britain's foreign policy framework. The unveiling of the updated integrated review has been choreographed to coincide with Sunak's visit to San Diego to agree the next steps in the landmark defense agreement with the United States and Australia. Mr. Sunak is under pressure at home to offer more help to the Defense Ministry to help combat the impact of inflation and spur production of ammunition and other military hardware to replace weapons which were sent to Ukraine to help Kiev push back the Russian forces. Well, for more on that, let's join fellow Atlas Network Ibrahim Anoba, joins me virtually now. Thank you very much for joining me on The World Today.
Thank you for having me, Sam.
What do you make of the renewed emphasis on the Australian, US, UK pact, popularly called AUKUS?
Well, this is a pact that was signed in 2021, and it's supposed to primarily counter Russian and Chinese so-called aggression or advances around that Asia-Pacific region of the world. And it's supposed to involve the purchase of submarines by Australia that should be totaling to about $233 billion. And of course, we know that surface ships has been very vulnerable these days, particularly if you look at the ongoing war between Russia and Ukraine, where a Russian warship was attacked and causing a devastating effect on the Russian Navy's capacity to advance on its war in Ukraine. So the US and the UK and now Russia or Australia have really learned from that. And it speaks to this new interest in investing in submarines, which should replace surface ships. But generally, I think we can also look at what China has said, and they've called this an aggression that is only going to perpetuate further movement towards nuclear war.
Now, a number of major powers seem to have ramped up defense spending as well. Talk about Taiwan, Japan, South Korea, just to mention a few. Along the side, North Korea, Iran, and others have also announced significant increases when it comes to their spending on defense. Do you think that we are at the start of an already, maybe a new arms race, you call it?
I think we are. I mean, you just need to look at the emphasis on big defense spending across the world. First, I mean, America, where I'm currently located, has been, since the days of Trump, strongly emphasizing huge defense spending and justifiable. And of course, we know China has been ramping up its defense spending as well. Russia has increased its spending because of its engagement in Ukraine. Saudi Arabia, UAE, big spenders in the Middle East. And now Australia, of course, the traditional spenders like the UK and the US. I mean, the UK now, I think just last year, it only spent about 2.2% of its GDP, about $55 billion on defense. But now, Sunak says the country is going to improve it to 2.5. So I think these numbers and interest speaks to renewed interest across the world for countries to increase their not only nuclear, but general military capacity, more so as a result of the current war between Russia and Ukraine.
Looking at nuclear powers, especially China, I'll take China for example, it's been building up its own military at a furious pace. It has a new defense minister as we speak. It also has the world's largest navy and has just commissioned its third aircraft carrier. What do you think China's immediate goal is?
I mean, I think China has made its intention clear several years ago, and that is to compete, if not to outrightly topple the US as the main player in the international system. I mean, you only need to look at not only its defense spending, but also its military presence across the world. I think it now has about 8 military bases across the world. And of course, in Africa, we know about the base in Djibouti, and there is now talks to, not even talks, but concluded talks to have another one in Equatorial Guinea. But China has made its interest in intent known. It's learning strongly from the ongoing crisis between Russia and Ukraine and how international sanctions, international cooperation, military-wise, could hamper any advance in situations like Taiwan. So, I mean, that speaks to his reasoning behind this increased military spending, but also spreading its military reach across the world.
All right. Is conflict between the U.S. and China inevitable? Because people have cited the Thucydides trap, for example, where conflict is inevitable between a rising power. In this case, we're talking about China. And this establishes the power in the case of United States to settle international order. What do you think, in your own view?
I mean, I think as a student of international relations, I wouldn't, I mean, of course, we have to recognize the fact that there is that certain, not certainty, but potential of things quickly escalating. We saw that recently in the Russian situation, where the U.S. and its allies, NATO generally, institute a red line that Russia has severely crossed. And I don't know how many red lines they're going to initiate anyways, but these small conflicts in pockets, regions across the world, in Ukraine right now, which could easily bring up another thing in Taiwan, or some situations in the Middle East, these proxy wars, I don't want to say cold wars, but proxy wars could easily flare the embers of full-blown confrontations between America and its allies against, say, strong powers like Russia and China. And I think the main spot for me of interest right now is Taiwan, the South China coast, where we saw how China responded with to the visit of Speaker Nancy Pelosi to Taiwan last year, and has continued to militarize that area of its country. And of course, we listened to what Xi Jinping emphasized during the speech, acceptance speech a couple of days ago, where he strongly, several times, emphasized the national reunification agenda of his government as top priority. So if you have China emphasizing unification, and America has categorically made it clear that they will not stand by while China annexed Taiwan, I mean, and you see people spending this much heavily on arms and nuclear capacity, it only speaks to the potential of what you said, Anne.
Let me take a cue from what you said about Mr. Xi. I mean, what do you think about his confirmation of his third term as president? Was it widely expected? Is it a surprise to people?
Well, I mean, the Chinese parliament they recently voted for Xi to continue for a third term for 5 years, and about 2,905 people, I think, voted yes to 0 no votes. And a lot of people have called it a rubber stamp parliament anyways, or assembly. So you either want to call it a rubber stamp or not, Xi will be there for another 5 years, and most likely a lifetime president. But that's on the side. The concern here is that there are key domestic issues in China. For example, we saw the massive protests that happened as a consequence of the stifling regulation regarding COVID-19. China's economy has not been growing as rapidly as it's been in the last 10 years. There is, of course, the pandemic, but also other issues concerning human rights violations of the Uyghur population and other minoritized communities in China. So you can see clearly that there are issues for Xi's government back home that is not clearly addressing. However, as you can expect in a very centralized authoritarian regime like the one he runs in Beijing, you shouldn't expect anything less from the Communist Party in China, but to approve Xi beyond the two-term.
Okay, finally, Ibrahim, before I let you go, some parts of the world seem left out of this arrangement. We cannot deny that fact, mostly Africa, excluding South Africa, of course. Is the continent really on a pedestal where the situation, considering that many of its countries are still battling life and death issues? There's hunger, there's poverty, and the likes.
Well, I mean, it's very unfortunate that African countries are largely left out of many of these conversations. I mean, it's really important that we also improve our military capacities, not to primarily contest international power, but to address insecurity, terrorism and banditry that are affecting many of our countries, particularly in West Africa or the Sahel region. But we're not seeing that language across the continent. And unfortunately, while other countries are fighting over economic strengths, investments, and whatnot, Africa is still grappling with, basic things like military coup in 2022, when the EU or NATO are helping their member states. Imagine Finland is now speaking, as you showed in your news before I came on. Finland is now a big player in the Ukraine-Russia conflict. Imagine, small countries like that, respectfully though, having big say Whereas in Africa today, the African Union is not helping its member countries negotiate better or attain stronger capacity in the international system. But what is the African Union doing? It's depending on Chinese loan. You know, China spent $200 million to help build the African Union headquarters in Addis Ababa in 2012. And now we are hearing news that China has been spying on the African Union leaders because it constructed that edifice. So again, while other countries and blocs are focusing on 2022 issues, African leaders and African countries are still stuck in the past, but it's unfortunate.
Well, we hope to get to that level where we begin to be part of all this talk and world issues. Thank you very much, Ibrahim Anoba, who's a fellow at the Atlas Network. Thanks for your time on The World Today.
Thanks, Anne.
To other stories, thousands of junior doctors in Britain walked out today in a 3-day strike that will disrupt patients' care as they protest over pay. The strike is the latest involving staff at Britain's state-funded National Health Service, that's the NHS, following walkouts by nurses, paramedics and other workers demanding a pay rise that better reflects double-digit levels of inflation. British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak is under pressure to help end the walkout by health workers, which also hinders one of his major priorities of cutting long waiting lists for treatment.
So junior doctors over the last 15 years have lost 26.1% of their pay due to inflation, and all we're asking for is for that pay to be restored, because no junior doctor today is worth less than a junior doctor in 2008. This is a culmination, as I say, of 15 years of pay cuts. When we've had a government that have imposed a public sector wage freeze, they imposed our last contract, and they imposed conditions on our supposedly independent pay review body. All of that has led to the government making all of these decisions on their own and cutting our pay to a point where doctors are starting on £14 an hour. We're just asking for that pay to be restored, and that looks like something like £19 an hour, which, in my opinion, is extremely reasonable. Steve Barclay set up a meeting and then didn't turn up to it. On the 24th of February, we announced dates for our first round of action, and on the 2nd of March, he came. He came to the table, which was brilliant. Finally, talks could start. And then he admitted he had no mandate. Steve Barclay, Secretary of State for Health, told us he had no mandate and had to go back to Rishi Sunak. So I agree, it's entirely disappointing. And if Rishi Sunak wants the negotiations to start, I think we need to go straight to the man himself, Rishi Sunak.
Let's head to Berlin, Bremen and Hamburg. The airports are set to have no commercial flights. They say no one will take off today due to a strike by trade union Verdi over pay. Hamburg Airport also said that arrivals could be delayed or even cancelled, while Bremen, on the other hand, said that there will be no flights from its airport. For Anne Sonntag, a passenger from the eastern German state who was due to fly from Berlin to Thailand this morning, she said, and I quote, "It's very sad because it's not our fault. I do not think this is right." And in this latest series of strikes and protests have hit major European economies, including France, Britain and Spain, as higher food and energy prices knock economies and living standards after the COVID-19 pandemic and the war in Ukraine. And here in Africa, over in Gabon, where authorities are continuing search operations for 31 people still missing after a ferry sank last week in the coastal area, killing 6 people. The Esther Miracle ferry, operated by Royal Coast Marine and carrying 161 passengers, was sailing from Libreville to Port Gentil when it sank on March the 9th off a coastal village. Air Force pilot Lieutenant Modeste Mezui told State House broadcasters that the Air Force has been conducting daily search operations in order to find the missing people since the ferry sank. This is in addition to dividing and diving teams who are looking for the shipwreck. Malawian authorities have closed schools in 10 southern districts over safety concerns after Cyclone Freddy wreaked devastation in neighboring Mozambique. Heavy rains pounding southern Malawi have washed away roads that disrupted power generation, with more rainfall expected in the next few days. Physical classes have been suspended for Monday and Tuesday in all learning institutions in the district, while teachers and students are being encouraged to use available online platforms and radio lessons. Neighboring Mozambique has received more than 1 year worth of rainfall in the past 4 weeks, as Cyclone Freddy made landfall on Sunday for the second time in 1 month. The death toll in Mozambique is at least 28 since the storm first made landfall. The 95th Academy Awards has yet again proven that dreams do come true. Oscar Awards, which is a glorious event of the year, took place on Sunday at the Dolby Theatre in Los Angeles. Here's a highlight of how the event went down. Take a look.
Hollywood stars walked a champagne-colored carpet at the Oscars, where organizers aim to keep the spotlight on everything, everywhere, all at once. Top Gun, Maverick, and other nominated films that brought crowds back to the cinemas.
Michelle, how are you feeling?
Rihanna delivered a much-anticipated performance of Lift Me Up, and Lady Gaga sang her original song from Top Gun Maverick at the Oscars ceremony. As ever, the Academy Awards were full of emotional acceptance speeches, surprise returns, and out-of-this-world movies.
And the Oscar goes.
And speaking of surprises, Malaysia's Michelle Yeoh won the Academy Award for Best Lead Actress for a role as a Chinese-American laundromat owner dealing with family turmoil in Everything, Everywhere, All at Once, becoming the first Asian star to win in that category.
For all the little boys and girls who look like me watching tonight, this is a beacon of hope and possibilities. This is proof that dreams dream big and dreams do come true. And ladies, don't let anybody tell you you are ever past your prime. I have to dedicate this to my mom, all the moms in the world, because they are really the superheroes. And without them, none of us will be here tonight.
Meanwhile, Jamie Lee Curtis won the Oscar for Best Supporting Actress for a role as the Imperial's ISR auditor bearing down on a Chinese-American laundromat owner struggling to finish her taxes in Everything, Everywhere, All at Once.
To all of the people who have supported the genre movies that I have made for all these years, the thousands and hundreds of thousands of people, we just won an Oscar together!
And Ki Hoon Kwang, the Vietnamese-born actor who as a child appeared in Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, received the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for his role as Waymond Wong in Everything, Everywhere, All at Once.
My mom is 84 years old, and she's at home watching. Mom, I just want an Oscar.
It is worthy of mention that Everything, Everywhere, All at Once claimed 7 awards overall, while All Quiet on the Western Front won 4 awards. And The Whale won 2 awards, including one for Brendan Fraser, who grabbed Best Actor. And taking home the Oscar for Best Sound was the team who worked on summer blockbuster Top Gun Maverick. Best Original Song went to Natu Natu for the film RRR. All Quiet on the Western Front wins Oscar for production design, amongst others.
I have to thank my parents. Mama, Papa,
It's a moment of joy and accomplishment as winners show off their Oscar awards at the post-Oscars Vanity Fair party. It's also been a historic award season at this year's Oscars as countries from Asia and India stood out immensely.
Well, if you can dream it, then you can have it. So congratulations to all those who won. Well, that's it on The World Today. Thank you so much for watching. I am Anne Mwawadu.